Is there any story you can share that could still be broadcast, but is close to the bone in terms of almost losing, any of the drivers not quite turning up? Because it's fair to say, some of the years we've had some great parties. I remember Michael had this thing about he would put his hands in the back of your jean pockets and pull the pockets, and it would. Without, like in a flash, you suddenly look like you're wearing a pair of chaps. Could he just rip the arse completely out of your jeans? There's been some fun and games over the years. Hello and welcome to Formula for Success. I'm David Coulthard, and unfortunately there's no Eddie again this week, but I do have a very special guest who'll be joining me shortly. But first, let's answer a question from one of you listeners. This one is from Albert in Paarl, South Africa. And his question is, when you talk about learning the track in F1, what does that actually mean? Do you make mental notes for what gears you need to shift into each corner? And why do drivers and engineers walk the track? And his last question is, which tracks other than Monaco require the car setup parts to change the most? Well, some good questions there, which I suspect you think it's a lot more scientific than the answer I'm going to give you. But, learning the track in modern times involves sim work, and it's as much for the engineers as it is for the actual drivers, because in simple terms, a driver can learn a racetrack within about 10 laps. So if you arrive at a completely new venue, within 10 laps, you've sort of achieved a lap time, which of course you would expect the track to rubber in and you would expect there to be further evolution. But within that sort of 15-minute period, you're up to speed and there's no surprises. So with my time in Formula One, we didn't have sim sessions ahead of going to the track. For example, Monte Carlo, the very first time I drove the circuit was in a Formula One car. I never raced here in Formula 3. So I think at the end of Friday, where we had the 1 hour of practice and then 1 hour of qualifying, I think I was like outside the top 10 somewhere, because there was a lot to take in around that track. Come Saturday qualifying, I ended up qualifying third. So not too bad for a first time at a track that I hadn't raced on before. But the drivers that arrive in Formula One nowadays, they have all raced F3, F2. They've been around Monaco beforehand. They go as far afield as Melbourne. So there's not really so many tracks that are a complete surprise to them. In terms of getting mental notes and gear changes and things like that, the gear change position is different depending on whether you've got 100 kilos of fuel on board or whether you're in qualifying mode with full engine power. So actually gear changes in modern F1. Everyone has the same gears. It's really just a reflection of whether the lights come on and tell you to change or not. So you don't actually need to think too much about it. And of course, with semi-automatic, there's no real risk of missing a gear and damaging a dog ring or over-revving the engine. So that part has become a lot easier. And I think the final part of your question, final two parts, was why do drivers and engineers walk the track? Well, it's as much to sort of have a debrief or a pre-brief in the fresh air as it is about actually going out and looking at the tarmac. I do think there is value for the drivers looking at curbs, understanding if you make a mistake, which curb can you run over without damaging the underside of the car. But it's actually more about just getting some peace and quiet away from the office rather than it being an essential part. And I'm not sure Max, Lewis and the likes actually do track walks anymore. It tends to be more the young drivers when they're young and enthusiastic about spending time at the racetrack. The more experienced guys tend to have more demands on their time, and to allocate an hour or more to walk a racetrack isn't really the best use of their time. And the final part of the question was setup changes. Yep, you're right, Monaco, you put on full downforce, dirty downforce. It doesn't matter if there's a lot of drag and inefficiency. If it gives load to the car, you want to have that on board. You don't really need to change the car as much mechanically as in days gone past, because the circuit's a lot smoother. You don't tend to have crests in the tarmac and things like that. But in old money, you would soften the car and as a consequence raise the car. I think that's probably more of a case in somewhere like Singapore, bumpier street circuits, maybe Azerbaijan. But Monaco is pretty smooth, I have to say, in terms of my experience. So hopefully that has answered all of that part of your question, Albert. And it's now time to move on to my special guest. And the special guest I have is someone that I've known for a very long time. I met him through the late, great Colin McRae, and I'm sure he can expand a little bit within the confines of this podcast. We can't discuss everything, but it is the founder, it's my friend, Fredrik Johnsson, the founder of Race of Champions. Fredrik, welcome to FFS.
Thank you, David. It's a pleasure being on the show. I listen to it every Thursday with pleasure. One of the highlights of the week. So real pleasure to be on the show for the first time.
Well, it is only a short period until I will be joining you down under in Sydney for the next latest and great installment of Race of Champions. So I've been with you in Paris, I've been in Dusseldorf, Beijing, Barbados. We've been in Sweden the last couple of years on snow and ice.
You're forgetting Riyadh.
Yeah.
You won the last stadium event that we did in the King Fahd Stadium, the first ever event that we did in Saudi Arabia, the first big international motorsport event there. And you won it. You were just phenomenal. You didn't put a wheel wrong all weekend.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting because I was, Channel 4 were broadcasting Race of Champions, and as I worked for Channel 4 for the Formula 1 show, so I was presenting as well as competing. So when I was, getting ready to interview the winner, I had to do it in a mirror. I didn't expect to win. But let's go right back to the beginning. Let's discover for our listeners a little bit about Fredrik Johnsson and how that led to you founding Race of Champions, which initially was more of a sort of rally-based invitational in one of, I forget the island you used to do it in, because I never went there. But
Gran Canaria.
Gran Canaria. So I've never been yet. But anyway, take us on the journey. How did you come to found this great event?
Long story short, I was lucky enough to get a job as a sports journalist for a big newspaper in Sweden when I was very young, straight out of school. And I followed World Rally and Formula 1 and the days when Stefan Johansson was driving for Ferrari and McLaren, and the Swedes were winning in World Rally. And I just felt it was a really poor experience for the fans. Especially in rallying at the time, you're sitting in traffic jams forever, walking several kilometers, and you're standing watching one corner, having no clue who is leading, what's going on in the event. And also at the time, the team with the best car, they did a full championship. And the others, they cherry-picked maybe Monte Carlo Safari Rally, where they had a chance. So you knew before the season started who was going to be world champion. So I said, we have to bring all the best drivers together and make them compete in identical cars and do it in a venue where the fans can see everything and where TV can film it. And so spoke with my partner at the time, Michel Mouton, and we realized it was the 10th anniversary of the World Rally Championship. And we went to speak to all the drivers and said, we have this idea and would like to invite you. And they all said yes. So we did it in Paris in 1988 for the first time. One car after the other, 15,000 spectators, great success. Everybody loved it. We were contacted by Nürburgring, by the ADAC. They asked us to come and do the event there. And we felt like, one car after the other is not quite spectacular enough. So we came up with the idea of the parallel track. And we created that for the first time in Nürburgring, in the Dunlop corner. Sellout crowd, incredible event. We were lucky with the weather, which is not always the case in Nürburgring. Phenomenal final where Stig Blomqvist beat Walter Röhrl. And then from there, it just grew and grew. We had a contract with Dorna for a few years, took it to Spain. The government and the tourist board in Gran Canaria contacted us, and we went there. We signed for 1 year. They extended it for 2 more years. We extended it for another 3 years. We were there for 12 years. And at one point, we had one of our sponsors. We invited a lot of the racing drivers because, as you said, it was mainly rally drivers in the beginning. And all these race drivers from Formula 1 and Le Mans that came to see the event, they all wanted to race. So I came up with the idea of creating the Nations Cup and get also racing drivers involved. And it was a mega success, and it changed the atmosphere at the race when all of a sudden you had all these drivers from Le Mans and F1, touring cars, NASCAR, IndyCar coming together, and the atmosphere was completely different and just phenomenal. So that's really evolved from the rally roots to an event that brings together everyone from all disciplines.
So how many years in total then? So from first year was what? And I thought it started in Gran Canaria, but it's great to get that insight that it was actually, more around what we call traditional race venues.
So it was 1988, the first one. And we've been going ever since with a few stops during the pandemic. And other than that, every year in a new venue. We've stayed a few years. Another big change was in 2004 when we got the opportunity to bring the event to Stade de France in Paris. And we were really hesitant because we felt like in the stadium, are you going to be able to make a track that's spectacular enough for the fans and exciting enough for the drivers? But finally we said, okay, let's try it. And you were there. That was your first ever Race of Champions. And Michael Schumacher was there. And the atmosphere with 64,000 spectators in Stade de France, bringing motor racing so much closer to the fans than you can do at traditional race circuits. It just changed the event completely. And we've never looked back since then. We went to Wembley Stadium, Beijing Bird's Olympic Stadium, and so on.
Yeah, no, from a spectacle, I think that there's plenty of track action and, little bumps and shunts, of course, are never great for your car suppliers, but it adds to the show. And largely speaking, touch wood, everyone's always managed to walk away from those incidents. But it's all part of what makes motorsport so exciting when you're there in the venues. I seem to remember in Paris, the jump over the bridge was a bit challenging for some of the cars because we were, of course, race drivers. You were trying to show vote for the fans as well as doing the longest jump. So I think some of the cars had issues with us landing on the nose and damaging windscreens and things like that. But we've always managed to sort of discuss with the drivers, find solutions, and keep the race being spectacular.
Our motto at the Race of Champions within the team is there are no problems, only solutions. And we always communicate with the drivers. If you guys come back with some feedback on the track, we'll find a way to adapt it that it makes sense. And so, as you said, the crossover bridge in Paris, for example, when Michael Schumacher came and tested the Ferrari the first time, flat out over it, I think he completely, the windscreen shattered and the chassis was demolished. They had one car less, and we had to install a chicane on the bridge. So always solutions to everything.
Yeah. And the thing that I have always really loved about the event is the camaraderie. And I think I may have mentioned this on previous podcasts, but everyone being together in the changing room together, when you're in these stadiums, they're either for football or rugby or whatever. So you've got these facilities that lend themselves to each of the drivers having their own little cubicle. And it may sound a bit weird, it's not that I want to see other drivers changing, but it really creates a banter and a respect, and the competition is clearly there. But there's so much respect between all of these different competitors, whether it's MotoGP champions or IndyCar champions, or, as you mentioned, Michael took part many, many times. And none of us win all the events. So there's got to be a reason we all come back. And I think it is that it feels like, you've got the competition, you've got the enjoyment, but without the, let's say, responsibilities that come with your day job.
I think that's a big part to it. We provide identical cars, always two identical cars on the start line. So only driver skill determines who wins. You also, with the parallel track, you avoid somebody saying, "Oh, that asshole pushed me out. He took me out on purpose." If you make a mistake, it's your fault. You can't blame anybody else. You can't blame the car. You can't blame the equipment. So I think that once you drivers get out of the car, you're there in a super atmosphere. There's not that there's any animosity between drivers for whatever reason that can be the case on a race circuit.
Yeah, there's been some great battles over the years. Is there a standout event for you personally?
Oh, there's so many. But I think this year we are so happy to have Heikki Kovalainen back. He's going to team up with Valtteri Bottas representing Finland in the Rock Nations Cup. And when he came to the Race of Champions the first year in Paris in 2004, same as you, and nobody really knew who he was. And he beat you, I think it was in the quarterfinal. He beat Jean Alesi, And then he came up against Michael in the Ferrari, and he beat Michael in the Ferrari. He jumps up on the roof of the car. You got 64,000 spectators in Stade de France, absolutely shocked. And I think that's one of the memories that truly stand out. And we're so happy to have Heikki back. He had a rough 2024 with open heart surgery, but he's back rallying in Japan and doing really well. And so cool to see him back in Sydney.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you mentioned Valtteri, his teammate down under. I actually had a beer with Valtteri, Mark Webber, and a few other friends on Friday night in our local pub here in Fontvieille that you know well. And we were having a good crack about looking forward to the event. What can we expect in Sydney? So the actual race event itself is the 7th and 8th of March. I've been to the stadium prior to the Sydney Olympics, way back when I was racing for McLaren. So I am familiar with the facility, but I haven't been there obviously for many, many years. So how does it look? What do you think the feel is going to be? What sort of crowd are we expecting?
So it's a brilliant venue for Race of Champions. The space is absolutely perfect for us. It's one of the stadiums where you have more space than in a football stadium. The way it's set up for us with the paddock, car change area, and as every seat in the stadium, you got a great view of the track and great hospitality. They've renovated the stadium. They've got some amazing big screens, 130-meter giant screen at one end of the stadium. And so we're expecting 50,000 spectators. And atmosphere should be really phenomenal, and we're hoping that you'll like the track and we don't have to do too many modifications after practice on the Thursday.
Yeah. Well, hopefully it's a track that suits my aging eye. In terms of drivers, I know you've got Seb there, Sebastian Vettel, of course. You've got Mick Schumacher, Valtteri, I mentioned, Heikki. I'm going to be paired up with Max McRae, Colin's nephew. Which I'm very
Alistair's son.
Alistair's son. Yeah, very much looking forward to getting to know him and go up against the other nations. The Norwegians have been pretty handy in the Nations Cup the last few years.
I mean, it's snow and ice. The Nordics are difficult to beat, but let's see how they go on the tarmac. You beat Petter Solberg in the final in Riyadh, so. I think it's very, very open. You got Petter and Oliver Solberg coming back defending their Nations Cup title. You've obviously got the Swedes with Mattias Ekström winning the individual event in Sweden. Mick Schumacher, as you said, who lost in the final. You've got Team USA with Travis Pastrana and Kurt Busch, NASCAR champion. They seem very motivated. If I understand correctly, they've been out practicing, trying to find race cars and rally cars and taking it extremely serious, which is great. They really want to win it. USA hasn't won the Nations Cup since 2002 when Jimmy Johnson, Jeff Gordon and Colin Edwards won it. And Travis has come close a few times, but they're ultra motivated. And we'll see how the Australians and the New Zealand guys will go as well.
Yeah, well, they'll have the local support, of course, and quite rightly so. When you mentioned Travis, for anyone that is not familiar with him, well worth Googling him. He is a freak of nature, isn't he? A great competitor in his own right. Push the boundaries of what normal people would consider doing. There's a famous image of him jumping out of an aircraft with just a harness underneath a pair of what looks like 1970s football shorts, no parachute, and then connecting with one of his buddies to land before obviously touching the ground. So I think that sums up what a crazy mofo he is.
Yeah, no, I've got so many good Travis stories. So I think the second year in Paris, he'd promised me to do a freestyle motorcycle exhibition between races. So he came in jet lagged from the States, went out for a first jump just to check the ramps, came up short. The guys who saw it, I didn't see it personally, thought he was going to die. During the entire event, when nobody was watching, you can tell that he was in pain. When anybody was watching, he said, no, I'm all good. And he went to the semi-final, lost against Sebastian Loeb in the Citroën WRC car that Sebastian had just won the World Rally Championship. He was like 2 meters behind with 2 corners to go, went for it, crashed, did phenomenal. A few days after the event, he texted me and said, Fredrik, I'm so happy. The leg is only broken. I thought it was the ligaments and everything. I'll be good to go in 6 weeks. So he'd done the entire event with a broken leg and almost beat Sebastian Loeb in his own car in the semifinal.
I remember it. He was limping after the whole weekend. But yeah, he's built from different stuff. He it's an absolute pleasure for me to be able to meet these legends from other disciplines and other walks of life. And then that's why I think for the drivers, what is particularly appealing about this competition is the ability to hang out and share stories and understand what it's like to, race Talladega in a NASCAR, or to, have you've done some crazy things in MotoGP and all the wonderful different sports stars that you've had there over the years. Is there any story you can share that could still be broadcast, but is close to the bone in terms of almost losing, any of the drivers not quite turning up? Because it's fair to say, some of the years we've had some great parties. I remember Michael had this thing about he would put his hands in the back of your jean pockets and pull the pockets, and it would, without, like in a flash, you suddenly look like you're wearing a pair of chaps because he just ripped the arse completely out of your jeans. There's been some fun and games over the years.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think Michael started that tradition in Beijing after they won Rock Nations Cup in 2009. And I think, Michael and Sebastian Vettel, they won the Rock Nations Cup 6 times for Germany, but they never quite got there in the individual race of champions. And I think that the way they celebrated their Nations Cup wins were a big reason why they didn't quite make it the next day.
No, there is, I'm sure there will be in Sydney. There's a big after party. So I've specifically booked a late afternoon flight on Sunday to allow for recovery, because the main event is Saturday evening.
Yeah, so we're doing evenings, Friday evening from 7:30 to 10:30, and then individual race of champions on Saturday 7:30 to 10:30, and then we'll have a wee get together after that in the evening.
So I think what's been particularly interesting, just to, this head-to-head format, you mentioned the snow and ice events definitely support the drivers who've grown up on snow and ice. A bit more challenging for the circuit guys. But we're back on tarmac. As we've touched on, we've had Sebastian Loeb's won the Race of Champions. You've had Formula One drivers win it, and everything in between. So it is probably the best format for sort of, who is the driver that's hot at that particular time.
I think the stadium track really levels the playing field. I think up in Sweden on snow and ice, very difficult to beat the rally drivers and the Nordic guys. I think in the stadium, as you've proven, winning in Riyadh, it really levels the playing field. I would like to ask you, what's your secret? How can you stay so sharp on a stadium track? You won it in Barbados, you won it in Riyadh. What's your trick? What's your technique?
Well, unlike those that you said about practicing already, my technique is try on my race suit the day before leaving to see if it still fits my aging belly, see if I can find a helmet that fits, and come to the event. So I just rely on instinct. I really don't, that I think is, I'm obviously very, very much retired from competition, but, I will try my very best when I'm with you. But as you know, over the years, I've had a fairly relaxed approach to it. And I think that when you're jumping in different cars, very often you're having them explained to you as a reminder just before the race starts, as in, like, what's the launch procedure. I think that just reactive, instinctive getting on with it, and the nature of the very sort of street circuit nature of the track. I was always pretty good on street circuits. I won Macau, won Monaco a couple of times. So I think you have to drive 99%. I think the 100%, whenever I've tried that, it usually ends up in me bending a wheel or touching a barrier somewhere.
So I remember you were saying something about the way you were turning into corners, that it suited you, like the stadium tracks that we had, like in Riyadh.
Yeah, well, also when we jump in I think you have KTM Expos again this year. Now they're manual H-pattern gearboxes. The young Formula One drivers, I've been there with Lando, and we've seen, other F1 drivers come to the event. give them a gear lever and an H-pattern gearbox, and it's, like giving them the instruction manual to fly a jet. They're like, their eyes are spinning. I think that's the one advantage in being the older generation, that we've grown up with that mechanical sympathy. If it's a car where it's semi-automatic and it's, basically feeling the car, then obviously they've got their natural speed of youth, and it becomes quite difficult. But I do enjoy the fact that we still have a range of cars, and all credit to you and something we should really share with our audience a bit more, actually, that in this modern world where most people, whether you have a manual car or what would be classed as a fully automatic car, even a manual car nowadays tends to have paddle shift, and a lot of people drive it like that. So we've lost the art of heeling and towing and things like that. So that's not a fun part. What are all the cars we have, actually? So we've got the KTM Expo. What other cars do you have on the show?
So we have the one I'm most excited about is the FC2 Rallycross car. 500 horsepower, accelerates from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in less than 2 seconds. Phenomenal new Rallycross cars. And we have the traditional supercar light 4-wheel drive Rallycross car, also 350 horsepower that we've had in Sweden and in some of the other events. We have the Toyota GR86 Cup cars. We have a Subaru, and we have the Polaris Racer Pro R as well, specially prepped. So there's a range of different cars. So to win the event, you have to prove yourself on a number of different vehicles. And I think that, as you say, the one who can come on the day and adapt, because everybody gets the same amount of practice, and it's not a lot of practice. So you have to adapt quickly and on the fly. And sometimes you come in and somebody tries too hard, as you say, and it's unforgiving. If you hit the wall, you're losing it. If you're 99% and you stay within the limits and get in the rhythm, that's the way to win it.
So the Polaris is similar to the Rock Buggy? Because that used to be a backbone of Racer Champions.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we don't have those this year. And we like to have cars with co-driver seats, because that's one of the big things that we can actually get media, competition winners, fans who can actually get the ultimate seat upgrade. So anybody who's in the stadium on Friday and Saturday night has a chance to win the ultimate seat upgrade, find themselves in a race suit, helmet on, and be a co-driver with yourself, Formula One world champion, NASCAR champion, Travis Pastrana, in the actual race, live on TV all over the world.
Yeah, no, that is a fun interaction. That said, I'm not being fattest here, but occasionally I've had someone step into the car where the race suit is being stretched to its outer limits, and I'm like, yeah, okay, this is pretty good ballast for the event, but you try and balance it up, don't you, within a few kilos?
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah. No, so we weigh all the co-drivers, and they are within 5 kilos of each other. And we've had some, speaking about how competitive the drivers are, some of the world's nicest people out of the race car has gone ballistic because they think their co-driver is a little bit heavier than the one in the opposing cars. So I've gone and said, okay, let me check. And I'm asked the weights and get, no, within 2 kilos, they were the same. I said, do you want to swap? I said, okay, I'm so sorry. So that, for sure, we're keeping it fair. So on that side, actually, a funny story from London. When I had a friend of mine, I think it was his birthday, and I think he weighs 115 kilos or something like that. So I had to find another co-driver within 5 kilos of 115 kilos. And this British rugby player, Mike Tyndall or whatever.
Yeah, he's married to Zara Phillips.
Yeah, so I asked Mike, how much do you weigh? And he goes like 112 kilos or something like that. I said, perfect. You're in the car in the semi-final. And he starts laughing and said, Fredrik, that's the first time somebody said that's perfect.
Yeah, no, if you need to balance up the weights, then finding a big guy is definitely a good thing. Yeah, so, right. Where can people actually, I assume there's still general admission tickets available. Where can people go to buy their tickets for the event?
Go to raceofchampions.com, and there's links to tickets. There's still tickets available. I know that some categories have already sold out, but there are tickets available. So come join us in Sydney. You won't regret it. It's an experience of a lifetime.
Yeah, it is indeed. So, Fredrik, you're not only the founder of Race of Champions, but you're a lifelong motorsports fan. What's getting you excited about F1 this season? Just to bring it back into FFS wheelhouse, the weekend after Sydney, Race of Champions is the first race of the Formula One season. We've got Lewis Hamilton in a Ferrari. We've got the various questions over, do McLaren continue their amazing form in winning the Constructors' Championship? Will Max make it 5? There's a lot to get excited. New rookie drivers on the grid that we haven't had as many of those in the last few years.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited about seeing how the 5 rookies are going to fare. Yeah, it's great. It's like the ketchup bottle, right? We've had hardly any youngsters coming in for so many years, and then all of a sudden we've got 5 of them. I think that's fantastic for the sport. I hope that some of them at least will really make their mark and be there for the long term. Of course, Lewis in Ferrari, not an easy job to go up against Charles in Ferrari. So that'll be very exciting to see. I think McLaren, if they can continue the way they are, both Oscar and Lando have a good chance of getting their first world title. So yeah, very much looking forward to Melbourne, and I'll go there after Sydney and look at the event and meet everybody. And yeah, we're trying to promote the F1 start as well. We got Channel 10 in Australia that are broadcasting Race of Champions and using it as a platform to get everybody excited about Melbourne the weekend after. So yeah, very much looking forward to the F1 start.
Right, Fredrik Johnsson, thank you very much for joining us here. Listeners, we'll be back next week, but until then, keep sending in your questions to ffs@whisper.tv and through social media at F1 for Success. Apologies again that we didn't have Eddie on the show this week, so you're going to have to miss out on the growl. So I'll just sign off with a meow.